So tonight we have our first outdoor speaker of our outdoor speaker series, Eric Melanson. Thank you so much for your time tonight. We do really appreciate it.
Touring. Longer. Yeah, it's all good. The Poseidon's good for like longer kind of touring ocean kayak or like sea kayak trips, just because you get a fair amount of pockets and modularity, but it's still really comfortable, a little more low profile, and it doesn't have the quick release belt either, which you don't necessarily need unless you're doing stuff where you're going to be under tension or using ropes for rescue situations. Yeah.
So the next question we have is, what do you normally carry on you in your life jacket for when you're really up north, where it's really cold?
So with that, I mean, that's less about the life jacket at that point, but there are some important things to keep in your kit all the time. I'm going to start with some fairly innocuous things because they're things that not a lot of people think of. Everyone like goes like right to the technical proficiencies. Sunscreen, honestly, and chapstick, because when you're on the water for like large periods of time, especially up north, because you're going up there in the summer, you're going to have so much sun. You know, if it's not overcast, you're getting like say 20 hours of sun a day, so it's going to get hot. And there's just going to be like no escape from the sunshine. So that's definitely an important thing to have. When I'm working, I carry my rescue kit, or what's sometimes called a pin kit. And the way we describe it is it's a 4-3-2-1-1 kind of kit. So I'll have, I'm just going to actually dig some stuff out here for you guys. So I'll have, actually, let me start with the 4 part of this, if I can find the darn carabiner. So I'll have 4 locking carabiners at any rate. I don't have them in there right now because I took them out to do something else with, but I'll have 4 locking carabiners that also have to be load bearing. So, you know, make sure you're getting something like that. I will also have these guys here, rescue pulleys. I need 3 of these. The important thing to make sure is they come apart like so that if I have, say, a line there, I don't have to thread the line into it. If the line is already running, I can just snap these onto the line, which is great. The other thing you want is you do want them to have this square shape like this with the little arms coming out on the side. This is what's called a prusik minding pulley. So often one of the things you'll do actually is our next step in the 4-3-2-1-1. So 4 locking carabiners, 3 pulleys, 2 prusik knots. They're useful for a couple different things. If you need to change the direction of the line you're using to free a canoe, or as a motion capture device, you can use them as well. Basically, you can set them up in such a way that as you pull on the rope, the prusik slides forward, and it only works with these kinds of pulleys. You can set it up so that the prusik slides forwards as you pull, and then when you release the rope, the prusik pulls tight, and so you don't actually lose any ground on that. The other thing you need is a throw bag, or some kind of buoyant heaving line, essentially. You want to get a fairly good quality one because that's going to be what takes a lot of load. You know, that's what you're throwing to people who are swimming. That's what you're putting a lot of weight on it. Those canoes, there's a fair amount of volume. The current's moving quickly, and when they're full of water, they're almost impossible to stop quickly. And that's actually, so you need a good rope, and you need the second thing, the last thing, which is we often carry a piece of tubular webbing as well. And you want about enough length that if you wrap it twice around your waist, you can kind of clip it. It makes a little belt. It gives you a good length to work with, and it's also just a convenient way to carry it. That's usually going to be important because that's your anchor point. So if you're doing an anchor around a tree or around a rock, you're using the tubular webbing. That'll be your first process, and then you'll have your carabiner linked off that, and your whole system is going to bear on that tubular webbing. That stuff is awesome. It can hold about 2 tons of force. So important to have. Other thing you want to have when you're working with, especially on northern rivers where you might be dealing with rope and entanglement is potentially an issue, is you want to have a rescue knife. This is just, it's a super simple one. I think it's the, oh gosh, what is it? It's like the aqua squeeze or something like that. And essentially it's important that it comes down out of that like that, because the last thing you want to have is a knife on your life jacket that then you're then pulling up while you're in the middle of getting thrown around by rapids. So that's important too. Sometimes on northern trips, I will carry a walkie-talkie. Very dependent. One of the problems with guiding on northern rivers and rivers that are bigger volume and faster current that people don't necessarily think about is that your group gets spread out a lot more. So you can have a lot more distance between your lead and sweep boats. Because as soon as that one boat goes into the current, it's out of there. Like you have to be peeling off like within intervals of about 5 seconds. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to talk, even between two boats, much less between your lead and sweep boat. It's a bit tricky, especially with canyons. Walkie-talkies reception's not always great. So that's a personal choice that I will take sometimes and won't take other times, just based on how well I think we can keep a group together. Other than that, honestly, if you're doing stuff in northern whitewater rivers, more than the life jacket, what you really need is some form of thermal protection, whether that be a wetsuit, and I recommend full length, not the shorties, or a dry suit. And often you can find either a full dry suit with a water sealed zipper that you'll come into through like the torso, or you can find so-called paddling suits, where it's essentially it'll be like integrated feet, and then you'll step into those, and kind of those will cinch around the waist, and you'll cinch a paddling jacket into that, and it'll be a two-piece system of some description that way. Dry suit's obviously better. The paddling suit can be cheaper.
So we have a request if you could repeat all the places that you've been to.
Yeah, so I have in Ontario and Quebec, I've paddled on the Des Moines River, the Spanish River, the Noir River, the Coulanges, as well as the Kasagami, and I guess I paddled up the Moose River, as well as I've done some stuff in the Rupert River region near Lake Mistassini, and Varon's there, kind of just east of James Bay. Other than that, I've actually done a fair amount of paddling up north. Mostly my experience was on the Nahanni. I've guided that river quite a few times. I'd say I'm pretty familiar with it. I've guided it about 8 times, I think, in total. Other than that, the Tishu River, the Keel, the Natla, the Redstone, the Raven's Throat, and the Mackenzie.
Which one's your favorite?
Which was my favorite? You can't do that to me. It would honestly be super hard to say. I loved the Keel for a lot of reasons. Being in the mountains is such an experience. The Nahanni is also amazing, and honestly, it's the kind of thing you're like, oh man, you get it 8 times. Like, do you ever get sick of it? Absolutely not. It feels like coming home every time. I spent Canada Day, I want to say 3 years in a row on the same gravel bar, because the trip started from the same place, the same day, 3 years in a row. And so I was on the same gravel bar every year for Canada Day, and it was awesome. The canyons are beautiful. Deepest canyon in Canada is Fourth Canyon. Walls are a kilometer high, and it's this awesome stratified karst limestone in like these white and black bands. It's like a cathedral. It's a spectacular trip. It's tricky to get up to. That's the problem, is it's not accessible from Yellowknife, really. You have to go to Norman Wells, and it's like another like short plane trip up north. That's a big expense. Honestly, a lot of the big expenses for doing these trips personally is the travel cost. The travel cost and getting all your gear and food up there. Do I do any play boating? I don't. It's actually a really funny thing, and I've run into this a couple times with the Carleton Outdoors Club. I've been invited on the spring and fall whitewater trip every year, and they're like, yeah, anybody who can do a roll can come. And they're like, Eric, you've done whitewater since you're 14. Like, you can come with us. I'm like, I don't have a roll. My whitewater experience is purely limited to like 17-foot tripping boats, fully loaded. I don't have a roll, but a fair amount of whitewater experience.
So the next question we have is, have you ever done a rodeo rescue / northern rescue in real life? And what have you learned to do / not do?
Oof. Yes, I've done 3. One went perfectly. One was a gong show. One was somewhere in the middle. Um,
Can you give us a little
boy.
bit more information about like what that process looks like for anyone in the chat who doesn't know?
Yeah, totally. So what does a northern rescue look like? It's very different from a lot of what you'd encounter doing stuff down south. So if you're doing stuff in Ontario and Quebec, you're not gonna see a lot of this kind of rescue. Because most of those rescues, the rivers are narrower, so you have the opportunity to rescue from the bank of a river. Plus, one of the big things that changes when you go up north as well is that because the water volume is higher, you get bigger waves. We'll have a spray deck on top of the canoe, and that acts as kind of a seal, and it keeps all the water in the boat, essentially. So the trick is, as opposed to doing a static rescue from a bank, where we're just like, throwing a throw bag, or we're just waiting for the rapid to end, and there'll be a big pool, like what happened down south. The Whitewater is continuous. So even after you've done the rapid, the water is still going 10 kilometers an hour. All that stuff is still going downriver pretty quickly. So what a northern rescue looks like is essentially I have, as someone mentioned, the rodeo rig. Yeah, so I have the rodeo rig in front of my boat. What's the rodeo rig? We talked about those buoyant heaving line. I have essentially 3 throw bags tied in sequence. So I have a quick release knot on the stern grab loop of my boat. And then I'll run kind of the open end of that throw bag through until I have that throw bag sitting in front of me. So that's going to the back end of the boat. And then I have the handle at the bottom, and I'll clip that in to the next throw bag, and then I'll make a double figure 8. Always use your life-saving knots, kids. I'll make my double figure 8 there, and I'll hook that into the next one. And at the end of that one, I also have a locking carabiner. And often what I'll do is I'll leave that, I'll clip that not around something, but I'll clip it open onto just the spray deck there, so I can pull it off if I need to. So what happens when you do a rodeo rescue is you may not be near a bank, but you're trying to stop this canoe that is full of water, has a lot of momentum. What I've learned that's honestly the most important thing about northern rescues is patience and pick your spot. It's so easy when you're in that kind of situation. You've just had a dump, there's people in the water, people are swimming, canoes, maybe gear going downstream, to kind of be like, okay, we got to get this rescue done. This rescue has to get done now. And kind of go early. The important thing is to wait, take a look at your banks, look for anchor points. Because if you don't have an anchor point, there is another way to do a northern rescue I'll talk about in a bit, but what you really want to find is like a good anchor point. So a solid tree that's in a solid spot, a rock you could wrap the rope around. And the next thing you want to do is you want to start manipulating that boat towards that anchor point. Jokingly called the bulldozer technique. Literally just, that boat's upside down. You just want to keep bumping your boat into it and moving it towards where you want to go. Oh no, Amelia, stop. Keep moving that towards where you want to go. And then once you have it, once you're pretty close, it's something you have to judge kind of for yourself. But what you want to do is you want to clip into that boat, and then you want to paddle downstream as fast as you can. You don't want to wait till your anchor point is beside you. You want to be paddling downstream towards it, because that'll give you more time for that rope to play out, for that canoe to go up. It gives you more time to get set up. And then you don't bother tying a knot. You just want to either belay it with a couple people, or just tension wrap it. Just keep wrapping loops around that tree, and that'll give you enough tension for that to stop. The other way to do a northern rescue is what's called a dynamic northern rescue. Some places, maybe you're not in a canyon, maybe there's open banks near you. What you want to then is basically, you as the rescuer want to be the person with the rope, and basically you want to beat your canoe, jump out, pull your quick release knot, and then have that set of throw bags with you. And you got your bow paddler to pull your canoe up, and they're responsible for that. And then essentially, with the rope in your hand and the canoe on the other end of it, you're going to be running down the bank, and you try and slow it down as you run with it. So you're kind of pulling on it, but you're not trying to stop it, because that'll just get you tossed. You're kind of just like putting tension on it, and progressively more and more tension as you kind of slow down. And that's another way to do it. So
yeah, I believe
I guess,
next. Oh, sorry.
No.
I believe the next question was, have you ever had an emergency situation on trip? I'm quite sure you have. So you just want to kind of like how often do emergencies happen on this kind of trip, or like what's some scary things that you've seen that you can actually share without breaking confidentiality issues?
Yeah. I guess the scary thing was the Northern Rescue. That was a bit of a gong show. That got really hectic. We were in a canyon. The rapid continues for another 2-3 kilometers. The people in the water, one was my co-guide, one was a very new whitewater paddler who was really, really cold averse and was nervous about whitewater in the first place. So again, talking about the patience and waiting for your moment, I definitely gave in a little bit to the need to do it now. And I was in a decent spot initially. What happened was I kind of started on the outside of the canoe. And then after I clipped in and went to then go to the bank, there was a bit of a surge in the water and the canoe bumped. The canoe that was submerged bumped my canoe and we got spun around and I got wrapped in the rope, just kind of once around my waist, which is never a situation you want to be in. We did make it to the bank, but that cost us enough time that I didn't manage to make my belay. So then I wound up in kind of a forced dynamic situation, by which I mean I got kind of pulled for the Nantucket sleigh ride. I was getting pulled, in this rapid, down this cliff wall, holding onto the canoe. I made a couple bad decisions in terms of, I was trying to slow the boat down by like grabbing rocks and stuff on the side. In retrospect, looking back on it, I think I did also definitely try and put my feet on the bottom to kind of lean back and slow it down, which is a huge foot entrapment risk. Definitely should have been done. Never do that. It all wound up all right in the end, but that was a situation that in a lot of ways could have gone worse. And this kind of goes back to the risk reward thing. It's always something that goes through my mind when we talk about emergency situations on canoes. I'm like, oh my God, what if this happens? What if this happens? And you run through scenarios in your head. I think what's important to remember is there's always a chain of events that leads up to these emergencies, and things that seem isolated or unrelated aren't necessarily. So preventing these emergency scenes like that is a huge matter of decision making going back up the chain, not coming to bite you back farther downstream down this chain of events. It's easy, like the classic situation is, you're coming to a rapid, your campsite's just on the other side of the rapid, everyone's cold, it's been raining all day, everyone's tired, you're like, we just got to get to the other side of the rapid, and then we'll be at camp. And you may be forced doing it in a way that you otherwise wouldn't, or you're not as careful because of, not being like, well, you know what, it's a crappy day, this isn't a safe situation, we'll just camp earlier. That's a nice campsite, you just want to get there, that's a great spot for the clients. So it's a lot about stuff about like really looking at decision chain making. Are there freak accidents? Absolutely. You can't ever be 100% safe, 100% ready for everything. It's, we talk about our risk reward scenario. I've never had a really bad scenario on one of my trips. Not really. I have had a friend who, I totally, they were going swimming. It was literally the last night of trip. Someone slipped as they were walking on a wet log. The log still had a branch, and they got part of this branch basically impaled in their upper thigh, about a thumb length of wood in the upper thigh, and they're boiling water. It took like over 10 liters of water to irrigate the wound. Yeah, stuff like that will happen. It's just accidents. That's, going back up the chain, it's deciding to walk on the wet log. Hard to say, oh, that was a big mistake. They shouldn't have let them do that. That's just kind of a personal thing. What
awesome.
Happens when you destroy or lose a canoe?
Yeah, I am curious as to what this is.
So it is Amelia. Amelia and I are family friends. We went to the same summer camp. The incident Amelia is referring to was the first day of my 52-day trip in the Arctic. We're carrying, all our supplies, food for 12 people for 52 days. And just after lunch, I destroyed a brand new Royal X boat. Yeah, it was.
How though?
So I guess this is one of those emergent situations that I was in, I suppose. It was just after lunch. The river had started to we had abnormally high water levels was part of the issue. So our current, I've talked to other people who have done this section of the trip, and they had to walk and like drag their canoes behind them down this section. We had water that was waist or even chest deep in parts, going very quickly. Like melt had happened, I don't know, probably a week prior tops. Still snow on the ground in places. As we're going down, there's a bit of a braid that's not there at low water, and one of the canoes went the wrong way around the braid. So we're trying to scramble to catch up to kind of get them back in our formation. And as we do, the river kind of turns this corner, and these braids come back together into one channel, and the channel narrows to, I don't know, it's got to be 30 feet. The boats we're using are 17 feet. And by the time I come around the corner into the rapid that's there, that's not marked on any map, one of the canoes has already dumped fully broadside into the channel, and I'm basically going to hit them. So to try and not hit them, we steered over to river left pretty hard. We hit a rock fairly high up, so we kind of tipped, got a lot of water in our boat. We didn't have spray decks on at this point of the trip, so the canoe basically filled up instantly. We just flat out sank. But the current is still so fast that we're still going downstream at a pretty significant pace. My bow paddler, God bless her, tries to grab a tree or some alders that are by the side of the river going into the river, and we actually have enough momentum that as she grabs on this to slow the boat down, there's enough force that the canoe just keeps going and she gets pulled out of the boat. So she's now on the opposite bank from everyone else. I'm kind of the only person left in this boat, completely full of water. And we calculated up the loaded weight, and we figure, all of the food packs are about 100 pounds each. Personal packs about 80 pounds. You'd have 4 food packs, 2 personal packs per boat, plus 2 people, aggregate weight 300 pounds, call it. We've got close to 1,000 pounds of stuff in these boats, and then it's full of water as well. So as I'm going down, I'm kind of trying to straighten the boat out. We hit a rock underwater, and normally what would happen is it would just tip the boat, or the boat would kind of bounce over it. Because the boat has so much stuff in it, it hits the rock, and the gunnels keep going in the same direction, but the whole bottom of the boat basically tears in half, and it goes at a right angle to the rest of the canoe. The issue being that now as the boat tries to capsize, I try and dive out of the canoe to not be rolled under the boat, but there's no space under the seat anymore because the bottom crimped. I'm in my hiking boots, so I just land flat on top of the gear, and then I get rolled under the boat, stuck on a gravel bar. And to be completely honest, between cold water and adrenaline, I don't really remember what happens next. But I wind up on the opposite bank from my bow paddler, one arm over a tree, one arm holding onto this canoe, and just watching packs float out. So I guess in a lot of ways, that's kind of the biggest emergency I personally was involved in a very intimate way. So that was day 1 of day 52. I got very hypothermic. My bow paddler got very hypothermic because, I was in the river for probably, I don't know, it felt like 5 to 10 minutes. It was probably a little less than that, but people were on the shore trying to do all kinds of other kind of damage control, and I was in a fairly stable spot. So I got picked up a little bit later, very cold. My bow paddler hasn't been able to get involved in this because she's on the opposite bank, so she's been standing still, sitting still, very cold. And it's just classic hypothermia. We both had what we call the umbles, stumbles, fumbles, grumbles, mumbles, very just low functioning. And it's a lot like being really, really drunk insofar as there is stuff that you want to do that is a bad idea to do. So you're like, we should keep moving, get warm, change into dry clothes. And you're like, yeah, I'll get to that. I just need like a 5-minute power nap. So scary in that way. But that was, I guess, the biggest one I was involved in. Yeah, we got helicoptered to another boat 3 days later and managed to finish most of the trip.
So I'm just curious, just from like my own personal training, when you and your bow paddler were hypothermic, the decision to keep you on trip was made why exactly?
Because it was it wasn't something that couldn't It was something that needed more facilities to be managed. Essentially, we got hot liquids and food into us. Started getting the metabolic rate up, changed into dry clothes as soon as we could, and it was something that could be managed.
So it wasn't ongoing. It was like brief hypothermia.
Yeah, it was about a day. Like there was about a day where I was hypothermic. I guess half a day, and then it kind of, I guess it cleared up after that. But yeah, that was the biggest. I guess it was the biggest emergency I've been involved in. So actually, that canoe is still in the Northwest Territories. We took the seats out, we took the yoke out, we took the thwarts out in case we needed replacement parts for other canoes later. And we wrote a message in it. And my brother started his trip in the same spot, and he found it there. And his girlfriend just led a trip in the same spot, and she found the canoe there. So my legacy continues. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions for Eric, or are we going to let him freestyle for a little bit again? You can either say it or you can put it in the chat. Either one's fine. Oh. Okay, so the question is, how do you get such a magnificent beard?
Years of practice, actually. There were several alpaca farmers in the local area that I've talked to, and we're close to working out a contract. That they'll be able to get some of my beard for making socks and stuff like that. We're not quite there yet. No, I just honestly, it's a funny thing. It doesn't grow down at all. I can't grow a long beard. It just grows out, and I have a bush attached to my face. But also, not shaving in a couple years helps.
Noah, you should turn your camera on. You also have a pretty magnificent beard.
Yes, show us the beard, Noah, if you're comfortable.
Noah is also our club president. He's the one who said I wasn't sure. Yeah. If you just want to like freestyle for a little bit, if you have any, here's the beard. There it is.
Oh, nice. Excellent. I respect that. That's
very
awesome.
suiting of an outdoor club president.
Yeah, see, he can grow it long, which I'm a little jealous of. Yours goes down. Yeah, I guess other things to be, what can I talk about? Well, yeah, I was once on a fairly disastrous outdoors club trip, not with Carlton. I do have to clear that up, not with Carlton. But yeah, basically it was a Madawaska River trip, early in the season, still snow on the ground, cold water. I was asked to come on the trip as someone who had a fair amount of whitewater experience, this being the year after the my 2-month canoe trip where I just told the incident story from. And for the most part, the trip went fairly well. There were a couple decisions made that I personally was a little frustrated with from a kind of a risk reward standpoint, a risk management standpoint, I guess. And we talked about this a little bit earlier in terms of there's a difference between knowing that you personally are technically proficient enough to be able to make a maneuver or to do an action, and it's different to have other people then try and follow you. So what happened particularly at this part was, I can't remember the name of the rap, but I want to say it was Split Rock. But essentially it comes kind of around an island, and right in the middle at this water level, there's a massive hole. We set up a safety boat below because it then continues after a short pool into another rapid. So that safety boat was down there to rescue anyone else who dumped. And as it turned out, this hole was a major obstacle. Basically every boat that went through there sank, essentially. Now we were running it empty, so we didn't have to recover gear as much. But at one point, after one of the canoes went through this hole, turned upside down, it got stuck on a rock somehow before the top of the next section, and they couldn't get it off of the rescue boat. So I went out with the rescue boat to kind of be in the water to free that canoe. And in the meantime, someone who was a fairly good whitewater paddler, and they personally did the rapid flawlessly, decided that while the safety boat was otherwise engaged, they would solo this particular rapid that everyone had tipped on. So I took a little bit of an issue with that, just in terms of no issue with them soloing the rapid, but more wait for the safety boat to not be engaged to do that. Like that was kind of an added unnecessary risk. It increases the risk and doesn't increase the reward of the action. So that was a little bit frustrating to see that. Some people didn't have waterproof gear. They were very cold. Couple issues there, but again, that's part of that kind of decision-making chain. And as people who may be the most competent outdoors people in a group, it's always important to remember that people are looking to you as an example. So even if, yes, we're out there to have fun too, there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with being in these positions, or even if you're not in a position with the club, with being one of the more technically proficient people on the trip, you're still setting an example. So that's, yeah, again, I just think that's kind of an important little anecdote to share.
So we have another question, and it's, as a professional guide, how many people do you find want to be involved with camp setup, and how many expect it to be done all by the guides?
It totally differs by trip, to be honest. And I feel pretty lucky to have been a canoe guide, because as someone who's guiding canoe trips, the people who come on canoe trips really tend more to want to be an active part of their own trip. So you're a lot more likely to get help from guiding a canoe trip, as opposed to, say, guiding a rafting trip on the same river. I know the rafting guides were kind of like limo drivers in a lot of ways. They're doing all the paddling while people are in the boats, because there's only 2 oars on the raft, so it would be hard to have everyone paddle. But they're doing all the paddling, they're setting up the camp, they're doing all the cooking, they're doing all the dishes. There's a lot of that. I would say fewer people want to help set up camp. Shush. Fewer people want to set up camp than don't want to set up camp. If I had to put a number on it, I'd probably say 30% of people are interested in helping set up camp. And often that'll be things like, they're helping to set up the tarp and stuff like that. So it's most of the guides setting up the kitchen area and stuff like that, which is honestly not that big a deal when you then consider that, people are pretty likely to do dishes. Often on guided trips, I don't really have to do dishes very often. Now that's because you have a lot of other responsibilities, and clients kind of see that, but it definitely is just, one less thing to have to do, which is wonderful. Now you can kind of help that along too. The trick we always used was we would, as dinner was finishing up, we'd put on a pot of water to boil that you can then put in the wash basins, and so you kind of, as you finish dinner, you have the dish station set up. And so if the clients don't have to set the dish station out, they'll be like, oh, here's all the dishes, here's the wash station, I can do dishes. And you're like, great, thanks so much.
So it's a little bit of strategic planning.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of, you want to enable your guests to feel like they can help set up, and then they will. And you can make it little teachable things too. Like a great way to get people involved in setting up is to be like, hey, who wants to learn how to put up a tarp? Who wants to learn how to make a canoe table? Cooking is a little more difficult because often, it's one of you or your guide are going to be cooking, because you want to be doing quality control. You don't want to leave it up to chance a little bit. And there's only so many people that can really be involved in that. But often you get clients being sous chefs and kind of, doing a lot of chopping carrots or grating cheese or whatever it happens to be, so that you can kind of then just do the assembly, which is awesome.
Have you ever had a trip where you had somebody who was there who probably really wasn't ready for that level of trip? Obviously, as a professional guide, I'm sure business is the goal of the business, but how do they decide who can go and who can't?
I was never really involved in those decisions. My impression was that it was very much left up to the individual clients. I never really had a situation where I had people on a trip who shouldn't have been on the trip. It was close a fair number of times, but often that kind of stuff can be mitigated by you and your co-guide. So for example, I had a fellow on one of my trips, 82, heart condition, and his wife, and they paddled together above the rapid section because they wanted to chat and stuff like that. Fair enough. But they also managed to tip outside of the rapid section. We weren't set up for a rescue, and that was a little bit trying. So for the Whitewater section, we did split them up, and we just put them with myself or my co-guide, and then that was easy to manage that way. Because I could keep up with the group basically on my own. So you kind of, you talk to your client. You're like, what do you want out of this, Barry? And he was just like, honestly, I just want to get like cool camera shots and like make like a little mini movie. I'm like, awesome. I haven't done this river, so I'm going to be sweep anyways. You and I'll hang out at the back, and I'll get you whatever, we'll get you whatever shots you want within reason. And so he's like, yeah, let's do this. And so, I have a little bit of freedom to kind of to do that without really. To get him what he wants, but also kind of manage that for the rest of my trip at the same time. Best kiting company to work for. I genuinely wouldn't be able to say. I thoroughly enjoyed working for Blackfeather. Their front office is amazing, and that's super important on a guiding trip because your front office is always, anything happens on trip, the front office is like your first phone call. You get on the side phone, you're like, hey, listen, this happened. So having a super competent front office, if you're going to be guiding for someone, is definitely something to look for because, yes, you're on point for a lot of the stuff and you're doing a lot of the technical work there. But having someone who can give you the information and the support you need, and honestly, it's usually not medical stuff. It's usually not rescue stuff. Having someone who can be like, oh yeah, no, don't worry, I can call the airline and rebook flights is often the biggest thing. There's an old joke in guiding called, it's not your fault, but it is your problem. You called your water taxi and they never showed up. So your clients are going to miss their flights. Well, you did everything you could to get that guy to where he was supposed to be in the time. He didn't show up. That's not your fault. But now your clients are like, Eric, how am I going to make my flights? You got to be like, okay, we got to be able to figure that out now.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any other questions before we let Eric wrap up? Hannah, I'm surprised you haven't asked any, to be honest. Calling people out now, I'm sorry. But if that is all, we'll give people like another minute or so. Oh, here we go.
Yeah,
you said earlier that social skills are one of the most important aspects of being/becoming a guide. Could you elaborate on things like what type of people you've had to deal with, what the dynamics are between guides and customers, and just what you need in general?
Yeah, so I've had I mean, with with guiding like that, you have a group. So not necessarily being in charge, but like making sure that the group dynamic is approachable and safe for everyone is super important. The way I approach it a lot is I'm kind of like, look, I love this place. I love being out in this place. I want you guys to love it too. So you kind of have to think of yourself in a lot of ways as a presenter, as an enabler of the place. So whether that's, someone's like, hey, like I'm super worried about the Whitewater coming up, like, how am I going to deal with that? I've never done Whitewater before. And that's happened to me, on trips where we don't necessarily have people who have Whitewater experience coming in. Sometimes it's up to you to manage. And so, maybe they'll go with you. You're like, hey, we can do some work on it at camp. Just being approachable, being empathetic is super important. Especially on longer trips. Like you have a lot of conversations that you may have to have with someone that can be kind of awkward. I'll be totally honest. Let's get into it. Like, someone comes to you and they have a UTI. Yeah, not great, but it's your responsibility to deal with that. Or honestly, constipation on longer trips is like a super big concern. Often people, because the diet changes and stuff like that, people get traveler's anxiety, stuff like that. If it goes, usually the rule of thumb we use is if it goes on for longer than 3 days, it's an issue. Bring a bag of prunes, honestly. But other than that,
like the coffee grounds and the dinner technique.
Never tried that. I don't know myself. But yeah, so it's, I've never had a situation where, you know, someone was getting picked on or something like that. That doesn't tend to happen in adult trips as much, but may happen if you're leading younger trips, for example. Because again, most of these people come out and they want a teamwork atmosphere, especially again on canoe trips. They want an atmosphere where there's teamwork. They want that camaraderie, that sense of companionship with people who are also out there to experience the same thing. Something I did have happen on a trip was I had a grandfather and a granddaughter getting into a full-blown screaming argument in the middle of camp, in the middle of dinner. It's been raining all day. We pulled up at this beach campsite. Jake and I are hustling. We get the kitchen set up. We get the tarp going. We get dinner on the hob. I'm still in my wet clothes. I still have my life jacket on. I'm still in my wet shoes. Like, I haven't changed. I literally hopped out of the canoe and just started doing all this stuff. We finished dinner. We finished dessert. And Jake and I, like, you know, we look at each other like, okay, great. This is like a natural lull. We can go off, set up our tents. Of course, as soon as we do, there's just screaming from the kitchen area. The fellow made a fairly ill-considered remark. I don't really want to get into the specifics of it. He made about, you know, a socio-political situation, which was met with a certain amount of vitriol from the granddaughter. And this is both our first year as full guides, and we didn't really know what to do with this. So and it's important to have other people you can talk about this to, and it's important to be able to after action this kind of stuff. Be like, hey, that was nuts. What could we have done better? Like, how could that have gone better? Usually, you know, a little meetup every day or every 2 days is awesome. We had no idea what to do there, so we went actually asked senior guides about that. Because yeah, they full on got into it and we're like, you know, what could we do about that? And someone's like, honestly, there's no hiding that. Don't just like go into the middle and be like, hey, that got intense, and like really hang a lantern on it. But you putting yourself in there kind of helps to break it up anyways. Stuff like that. I've had some customers who get super antsy about how late in the day it's getting. You know, when are we going to have lunch? Stuff like that. So there's different ways to manage that. One group that got super gun shy, what I wound up doing is I'd bring up the map at dinner, and they were like, you know, we don't want to paddle late. I'm like, okay, fair enough. But listen, we got 60 kilometers to go. We got 4 days to do it in. Here's where I'm recommending we camp. Here's about when we'll get into camp each day. I'm open to suggestions, but here's where we got to be in 4 days. And often when you lay it out to them like that, when they see kind of what the reality of having to work within that is, they're pretty understanding. They're like, yeah, okay, I see, you know, we'll just have to do it. So yeah, I guess just, you know, in terms of soft skills and personal skills, empathy is huge. Also, don't ever lie to your clients. They'll figure it out. It's like, it's not that difficult. You know, is this portage going to suck? Yeah, it might. Is it going to rain today? 60% chance of rain is always the right answer, because it means they'll keep their rain gear on top, even if it doesn't rain. Stuff like that. How do I get more into Whitewater? To take the jump from the beginner certs. Honestly, the beginner certs are a great place to start. If you're looking for courses to take, I can recommend no place more highly than the Madawaska Canoe Center. They are just, you know, amazing teachers. They have some of the best courses there. Hugely recommend them. Madawaska Canoe Center is a great place to go. But also, it's really just a matter of doing it, of, you know, finding rapids and playing around with them, trying maneuvers. You know, having someone out there who kind of knows a little bit more about what they're doing than you is always an asset. Even for me, you know, if I had people in my friend group who were better than I was, I would absolutely be like, hey, take me out, show me something cool, and just working on techniques like that. Did that kind of answer your question, Matthew, or is there more details, I guess, that you'd like to have?
So I was actually told to ask you a very specific question, and I don't know why, but the question is, what is the best gift you've received from a client?
Best gift I received from a client?
Or weirdest? I'm not sure. Something about a gift from a client. It's from Josh.
Josh.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know what he's talking about. Best gift I got was actually an outdoor research Gore-Tex wide brim hat. It was, I noticed him wearing it on the trip, and I looked at it, and I just thought it was like one of the classic Tilly hat kind of things. And then it had outdoor research in the front, and then I saw on the back it said Gore-Tex. So it was a waterproof safari hat kind of thing. I thought that was awesome. And honestly, I've started using one when I guide all the time, especially if you're guiding canoeing, kayaking, or rafting. If you're in front and then people say something from behind and you can't hear them, that'll happen all the time with your hood up. But if you have the hat on, you're more likely to be able to hear people behind you. It's great. Highly recommend waterproof hats is the moral to that story.
I was definitely very confused. He just thought it was a nice question. I apologize. I thought he was trying to make you laugh about something. I have no clue.
Oh, no, definitely the waterproof hat. And that kind of thing isn't common. Just had a really great group. That was actually my first trip on the Nahanni, and it was just such an amazing once in a lifetime trip. It was, circumstances really just came together in a lot of ways. So it was super cool, and I got a waterproof hat out of it, and I still have it somewhere.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight, Eric. This was fantastic. I know we kind of had numbers going up and down throughout the night, but I think everyone who was here probably thoroughly enjoyed it. So again, thank you so much. If anyone does have any last minute questions, if you're cool to stay here for another minute or two while people log off, just so we know that everyone's good. And then,
yeah, totally.
Yeah, awesome.
I often get a lot of questions about gear. So if you have any questions about gear, rain gear, stuff to stay warm, etc., happy to answer those.